Welcome to Recovery His Way. I'm your host, Tom Reynolds, and today I'm blessed to have a good friend, Patty Sykstus, with us. It's good to have you, Patty.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
I've known Patty for a number of years, and she's very active in our community here in Huntsville with a group called NOMA, and Not One More Alabama. And I wanted to kind of get to know you and get to know your background. And obviously, I didn't come from a life of addiction. You got into it in a different kind of way as well. So I'd like to kind of maybe just hear about your story to get started, kind of what got you into being passionate about substance abuse and helping people overcome that struggle.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is a tremendous opportunity. I can talk about addiction and recovery all day long, and so love to have the opportunity to share. So what got me into this? Yes, definitely not a traditional path. Started back, let me just go back to, we moved to Huntsville in 1992.
Okay.
My oldest son was 6 months old at the time, and I worked at Huntsville Hospital. I actually worked for Morrison's, if you remember Morrison's cafeteria.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah,
They ran the food service at Huntsville Hospital for over 40 years, and they had a clinical nutrition component to their contract that they had. So I ran that whole program there at Huntsville Hospital, and I was there when they built the tram and when they took on the other building. So lots of big challenges and lots of fun, and I really, really enjoyed it. But I had 2 kids, and we wanted a third, and that was not a part-time job. That was a very, very, very full-time job. Right. People have a problem if you don't get breakfast out in the hospital. It's a big deal. You've got to be on your game. And so we made the decision that I would stay home and be with the kids and raise them. And so that's what I did for about 18 years. I stayed home. And
that's a very full-time job.
Yeah, it was a really, really full-time job. And I think when we made that decision, we thought, until they're all in school, and then I'll go back, and that was really the plan. But it's just not kind of how it worked out. As they got older, the needs got greater, and other family members and elderly folks in the family, and just my needs became other than going back into the formal work world. Right. So that's what I did. And of course, I jumped into that with 2 feet and, got very involved in PTA and sports and booster clubs and, wherever I could plug myself in and use the skills that I had and hopefully do something to make a difference and do something to help. And so I did all that, and it was fun, and I loved every minute of it, and it was great. Kind of started getting a little antsy somewhere in there, trying to figure out what's next in life and what am I going to do, as my kids were all growing up and starting to become more independent. I was like, what do I do next? And so tried some different things. I taught middle school, 7th grade home ec one year. Okay. We all laughed about that. One of 2 things would happen that year. I would either find my passion, which would be to be a middle school home ec teacher, or we'd all laugh about the one year that I taught middle school home ec. And we all laugh about the year that I taught middle school home ec. It was really hard. That was a whole new appreciation for teachers and what they do.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's really an incredible profession and really challenging. So anyway, back to the drawing board. So kind of parallel to all that, in our own family, my oldest son had been struggling for a while. Started in high school. Actually, it started probably long before that. He was he's had to date 30 surgeries on his ears, and through that he's been on pain medication many times from 3 years old on, and never really thought anything about that. That was just part of the story. It's, you leave, you have surgery, you come home, you take pain medicine. You can't tell in somebody's ear what a pain level is for a child. So you just give what you're supposed to give and make sure that they're comfortable. And so as the years unfolded and his life started to unfold, we'd kind of already laid some foundation there by years of taking opiates. For, what turned out to be a full-blown opiate addiction as he went into high school and college. He went to Auburn, super smart young man, just, like so many young people that find themselves in this place. Very smart, very resourceful, very, just a big personality, wonderful young man. He was class president 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade at Grissom High School here in Huntsville. Just a real charismatic type person. And really just a joy to have around for the most part, but you could just tell there were changes, there were things changing in his world, and we sent him off to Auburn thinking that was gonna fix everything, get him in a new environment, new people, new challenges, challenge him academically, and just really couldn't be further from the truth. He went down there and things really unraveled and fell apart. And March of 2012, he called home. He was a sophomore, spring of his sophomore year. Not sure how he was even still there at that point, but that's a story for another day. But he called home and said, I can't do this anymore and I need help. And
were you aware this whole time that this was a struggle for him?
Question.
Was he being open about that?
No, I had no idea. It's really interesting. Now that I know what I know today, it's like, geez, I mean, how many red flags could have been going off?
Right.
No, I mean, you got to remember too, this was like 2008 to 2010. Well, even earlier than that, he probably started using sometime in middle school or, experimenting. And so there wasn't much talk going on back then in 2008, 2009. I mean, there was a lot of stigma associated, and there just wasn't much out there for families. There wasn't much out there available to you to educate yourself and to learn. In the meantime, he was being as secretive as he possibly could be, because that's what they do. Right. And so he wasn't going to let us know what was happening. And I just didn't have enough knowledge. I didn't have enough information to know what I was seeing, what now with today's knowledge would be very evident to me. I had no clue. I had absolutely no clue. I knew something was wrong. I knew that there were issues. I knew he wasn't fulfilling his potential. I knew his grades were terrible. I knew his friends. I mean, there was lots of things I was seeing that told me as a parent that something's wrong.
When you're at that point in your life and you're seeing those things, we all kind of develop a scenario, a narrative that says this is what's going on.
Yeah.
What kind of narrative were you telling yourself while this is going on that kind of explained what was going on? Was it just, was it some life struggles? Was he having some, what was kind of what did you try to convince yourself of?
Yeah, good question. I think that you create storylines that make it work for you. What's that word that you always hear? Plausible. Right. I could create plausible explanations for almost everything. Right. Probably not probable explanations, but plausible. Right. And, so I could kind of explain away everything. I work a lot with families, and that dynamic between a husband and a wife, I always say that was just such a really challenging time in our relationship, because when I'd want to go hard, he'd want to go easy. When he'd want to go easy, I'd want to go hard. It was hard for us to get on the same page, have a united message to my son of what was acceptable, what was not acceptable. Right. So we were sending crazy mixed messages to him, which allowed him to continue to do what he was doing. Right. He'd had... he was just always a very challenging young man. I mean, in a good way. I mean, he questions everything. He's got a vocabulary that knows no end. He was able to kind of just talk through almost any scenario that came up to get us to a point where we would be, okay, we'll just keep moving forward then.
So when this phone call from Auburn comes up, was he admitting at that point that he was having a substance abuse problem, or was it just that school wasn't working for me, or where were we at then?
It was a phone call that I will never forget, because it was actually on my 2 days before my birthday, but it was the day we were celebrating my birthday. And he had called home. There had been some things building up that I had kind of been pushing harder than I'd probably normally do. And finally, he just said, I can't do this. I'm going to call you tonight. I'm going to tell you everything. Well, we had a big family birthday dinner, and I had to put on my, happy face and make it look like everything was fine. But we get home, and I know this phone call's coming, but I still don't know what it is. I just know that there's something different in his voice. I could hear it. I could tell it. And yeah, when he called, he was just sobbing, just pretty uncontrollably. And I was just like, what? I mean, what is it? What is it? I'm like, what, Jack, are you on drugs or something? And I said it very sarcastically, and he just got really quiet. And it makes me cry, even though that was a long time ago. But I'll never forget that moment, because it was kind of one of those knock me over with a feather moments. It's like, that explains it all. Right. I mean, that's everything. That explains everything that's been happening.
Right.
And so, we then said, okay, all right, now we got to figure out what to do. And it was kind of interesting because I didn't know anything about drug use, addiction, opiates, anything about anything. Right. Completely clueless in this department. Right. But I had one friend who's around our age that I knew was in recovery. He didn't talk super openly about it, but I knew enough to know that he was actively engaged in a program of recovery. So I picked up the phone and I called him and I just started crying and he's like, oh, it's Jack. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, I'll be right over. And within 5-10 minutes, he was at my door. And that was like my first introduction into this world that I'm like, who are these people? Like, I've known this person for years, but I didn't know this person.
Right.
And, we brought my son home. He sat and talked to him, took him aside, had a conversation, brought us in. He's like, your son needs to get treatment. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a serious issue going on. And it was a serious issue. Right. We're lucky that he's still here with us, in all honesty, with considering what life he was leading at the time. And so that was kind of the beginning. We found treatment for him. He went to treatment for 60 days, inpatient treatment. Then he went to a sober living in Atlanta, lived there for about a year in that program. Ended up moving out with a few guys that were in the program. And one of them is still to this day his all-time best friend in life and just partner and everything. And they're both still sober today. It's been 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
Yeah, he's done incredible. We went back to school, went through the collegiate recovery program in Alabama, got 2 master's degrees, marriage and family therapy. Okay. But he's also a tech guy. That's always been his love, probably more than anything. So he worked for the Partnership to End Addiction for a number of years. And now he works for a company that's a tech startup company that does mental health and substance use, and helping build that platform and doing that with the clinician's view and eye.
So it's kind of able to combine those two ideas.
Yeah. So it's been an amazing ride watching what he's done with this experience and where he's gone with it in his life. But it's been really life-changing for me personally, because as he was going through his path and his journey in recovery, it really created a whole new life for myself and opened up new doors that I never knew were there.
Right. Well, so tell us kind of what your journey was. I know I'm familiar with Not One More Alabama, so maybe you could explain more about what that is, how that got started, how you intersect with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So he got sober around 2012. So around 2014, I just started kind of, I'd been to Al-Anon meetings, I'd been to Families Anonymous, I'd been just trying to learn and get more information, learn how I could be a good support and family member. And so started learning things about that. And but I kind of was feeling this calling. It's like everybody, whenever I would go over and visit him, or even when we took him to treatment, I kept meeting these people along the way that I was like, I just kept saying, like, who are these people? I mean, like they seem to know something deeper, better, more than people I had met in my life. It's like they got it. They got something. And I just was really intrigued by that. And I felt a real connection to it. And so, as time went on, I was like, I need to learn more. So I ended up taking a little job out at Bradford Health Services here in Madison as an overnight unit clerk. It was just a part-time PRN, not every day, but and boy, did I learn. I learned a lot. When you work the overnight shift, when somebody gets admitted to Bradford in the middle of the night at 2 a.m., something's gone not correct in their day. They've had a bad day. And so, just a real privilege to be that person that could sit with them. Yes, I was doing their paperwork. Yes, I was doing whatever tasks that had to be done to process them. But what an opportunity to be with somebody at this really vulnerable place. And I just started seeing that this was really something that was speaking to me. And so I also learned that the overnight shift I was way too old for. So I had to come up with another plan. And as some other opportunities opened up there, I pursued those and kind of took a role in a discharge planning type of role there, and continued to learn, got to sit in lots of different meetings and just soak it all in, and had some really incredible mentors there that taught me a lot. And so did that for a while. Then I ended up running their family program at the Reprieve, which was their program down in Opelika, and got to work with families a lot. And certainly as a family member, found that to be kind of my calling is helping other families kind of navigate through this and just really to connect them to resources. So during that process, I met my good friend Shannon, and one day Shannon and I, who had some similar experiences, were talking, and we are like, what a waste that we have all this information, had all these experiences, have all this knowledge that we didn't have when we went through it, and to just take it home and not do anything with it. And so that was kind of the birth of Not One More Alabama, is we were like, let's go do something with this and go help that next family member that's out there, and you know, try to help connect them to resources, which in turn helps their loved one who's struggling. And that's kind of where it got started.
Well, so when did Not One More start, and what's kind of the mission, or what's the real driving force behind that for you?
So Not One More Alabama started in 2016, November, so the very end of 16. So basically 17 was our first real year. And we really had no idea what we were doing, and we had no idea what we were creating. We just knew what was in our heart, and we knew that there was a need in our community, but we didn't really know quite what it was going to look like. And those first couple years were a little messy, trying to figure all that out and turn it into something real and something with substance. But, you know, we came up with a couple of signature events, our End Heroin walk, which we've done, which is now the End Addiction Huntsville walk. We partnered up with some organizations like in Birmingham with the Addiction Prevention Coalition, who has kind of mentored us and guided us, the Drug Education Council in Mobile, who's guided us, and the Partnership to End Addiction National Organization has been a great partner with us and given us lots of knowledge and resources. So we just started kind of listening to what are people asking for, and the beauty of being a brand new organization is that there's not, and we were kind of one of a kind. There wasn't really anybody else doing exactly what we were doing. We're not a treatment provider. We're not, we really got a chance to just create what we felt the needs were speaking to us. And so we just listened. We listened to what people were asking for, and then we tried to create programming around that. We're all volunteer, which makes us a little unusual out there. Probably won't be forever. That's not a real sustainable way to operate, but it's been a great way to get started, because you know, if somebody's willing to give that amount of time and energy that they have, that they're really committed to your mission. And so, you know, we have many people that are on our board that have been there since day one, that have been with us since the beginning, and have a real heart for what we're doing. And then we have lots of new people. We have 22 people on our board, so we have lots of people that are there for lots of different reasons and come from different backgrounds, and just have different motivation for being there. But so yeah, we just started kind of listening, and it's been really interesting, because I think our first thought is that we would basically be there to help family members, which is probably first and foremost what we do, but it's taken some different forms. I mean, we have a family support group that we do, and so we definitely do lots of education to families, and just try to bring information to people and connect people to resources. But another group that showed up that we started hearing from were people that lost their loved ones. And that was not my personal experience. So it wasn't really something that I knew as much about in terms of how to support and how to be there and help. But they showed up, and they taught us, what their experiences were. They taught us what they needed, because they're still family members of somebody who struggled with addiction, and they still have all the needs of a family. It's just their story looks different than maybe my story or somebody else's story who has a loved one that's still out there using. And so yeah, we started trying to create opportunities for them to remember and celebrate the lives of the people. So we do the Angel Tree, which is down on the Tinsel Trail, which has turned into, the first year we did that, we had 20 something photos on the tree. And this past year we had 78, which speaks to both the problem and the increasing number of people, but also just the awareness of people that, and the willingness of people to come out and put a picture of their loved one on a tree in the middle of Big Spring Park and say, my loved one died from an overdose, or my loved one died from a substance use disorder. And that goes a long way in reducing stigma for all those people that are out there trying to find help and look for resources. So they're making a big statement by doing that and putting their loved one out there. We have a little candlelight memorial that we do with them, and it just gives an opportunity for them to connect and come together with others, and at a powerful time of the year. To just be able to do that. So we do that. We started a grief workshop where people could come together. We have therapists that are there that guide them through a weekend-long program. We do that out at the Vision Ministry Retreat Center. And just incredibly transformational weekend for family members that have maybe never talked. I mean, most of them have no interest in being there. They would rather do anything but be there. They walk in the door with, you can just see a weight and a cloud, and they just really, really reluctant, but for some reason they signed up and they did it. And at the end of the weekend, they're hugging, they're laughing, they're crying, but they're crying with smiles on their faces and new connections and new relationships and new tools to be able to move forward and go out into their home and their work and their communities and move forward in their grief. So
sounds like a great thing. I know it's been a kind of a pooling together and then a distributed out kind of thing, kind of pulling everything together and kind of reconnecting. How do people get in touch with Not One More Alabama? How would you?
Yeah, the best way is really our website. If they go on our website, we have tons of resources on there, and we really just use it as a tool to connect people to other things. Like I said, we don't really provide a lot of direct services. We really see ourselves as a group that connects people to the people that are out there doing the resources, that are out there doing the treatment or interventions or whatever services are out there. So our website, which is notonemorealabama.org, is one of the best ways to find, pretty much everything. We keep that pretty updated. Staying on our social media, both our Facebook and our Instagram are really good. Getting on our email list, which they can do from the website. Make sure that anything big that we do, we're going to send out an email, make sure people know about it. So that's kind of a foolproof way to make sure that you're in the know on upcoming programs or things like that, because sometimes things can run through on social media and be gone before you ever saw them. So the email sign up is a good way to make sure that they get that.
Right. You've now been very at the center of this. I've known you for a while, and I can see why you ran the cafeteria the way you did, because you run everything that way, and you very much pour yourself into it and pour your effort into it. And of course, in this community, we're in much better hands because of your influence and what you've done. It's been tremendous. As you deal with this recovery journey, what are some real core issues that you find yourself facing today? What are the pressing things that you see as we address this topic locally as well as nationally?
Yeah, so let's see. I think hard to not answer that question with, to me, the most pressing issue right now is fentanyl and the fact that we're seeing such an increase in overdose deaths. And a lot of these, what's really changed in the 6 years or so that NOMA's been around is that for the most part, at the earlier stages in this, the people that were coming to us were people who'd had family members with long-term addiction problems, who'd struggled for, sometimes many years, sometimes not as many, but had dealt with addiction, had dealt with a substance use disorder. Where some of the families that we're seeing now are their children really didn't. They just maybe were engaging in some risky behavior. Maybe they went down to college and, partied and whatever, but they weren't really people that had real substance use issues all along. But because of fentanyl, they're finding themselves in situations where their loved ones are overdosing and dying. And so it's creating a different storyline, both from supporting those families, but also in teaching that, you can't have one pill can kill. And it's a whole new message that has to be out there. We always talked about, certain drugs. Obviously, there were certain substances that lended themselves more to overdose than others. But now it's kind of a no toler. There's really none that you could say, I don't know if I'd worry that much about my child now, let it unfold and see. I wouldn't say that to any parent now.
It can be in anything.
Anything.
Right.
And so that's really been, to me, the biggest change recently in the storyline and in messaging and to families and to young people, and is that it's just the game's changed a lot that way. You don't have to wait till someone has an addiction to recognize and address the issue. That risky behavior that kids can do can result in their death. And so it's a different story. So that's been one of the big things that I've noticed. I think one of the things that we have found as an organization, I don't know if this is new, but it's something that's really important to us, is just that role of connection for people that are struggling with substance use issues. I've watched in my son's life and his recovery the importance of connection to his recovery community, to his friends in recovery. And I think that's been one of the things that we've seen here, is so many families that, when that loved one does show willingness to go to treatment, they are willing to go do something different, helping them to figure out what that looks like, and then sending them maybe off somewhere because, some people aren't as comfortable going to treatment in their local community. They want to get away and just separate for a little while, which certainly makes sense. But the problem is that it's really hard for them to come back into their community. They don't have a recovery community here. They don't have a place to plug in. Their families try to be that for them, but they really can't. That's not what they need. They need their families and they need that connection, but they need that connection with a recovery community as well, which is such a great thing with His Way, because you do have that. You have that the roots and the foundation that people can keep coming back and giving back. But there's not a lot of that if somebody leaves and goes off and comes back. However, for some people, that is the best option, to go off somewhere and go seek a specific type of treatment or whatever their individual needs may be. So that's something that's kind of, as we're moving forward, we're really wanting to focus on, is how to provide more and more opportunities for connection for people. I've just seen so many families that have sent their loved one off to treatment. They go off, they do great. They're so excited. They've found their recovery. They're feeling good, but they want to come home. They want to be where grandma and grandpa are and their cousins and their home, and then they come back and they're not successful because and it's devastating. It's devastating to everyone. So that's kind of one of the things that I think is maybe missing. On a whole, I think there's individual programs that do great work with that, but I think that as a community, we can do better in providing opportunities for people to connection of family members, connection of people who have lost loved ones, connection of people who are recently in recovery, or people who are in long-term recovery that just, maybe are out there, white knuckling it, holding on, but still are seeking something more.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Patty, I appreciate you coming in and sharing with us. I appreciate the work of Not One More, and certainly would encourage our audience to check out their website at Not One More, Alabama.
NotOneMoreAlabama.org.
Okay. And I thank you for watching today, Recovery His Way. If you'd like to know more about His Way and our ministry, you can check out our website at hiswayinc.org.